Shit.
Welcome to the Savage Worlds GM podcast. I'm your host, Jared Savage Daddy Gunning. Tonight's episode brought to you by our faithful patrons at Patreon. If you want to join their ranks, feel free to go over to patreon.com/SWGM podcast and join in. Throw us a buck. Get behind the program. If you're watching the stream live on YouTube, feel free to participate in the chat. We do bring that in live into the show. We are on social media. You can follow us at SWGM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook/SWGM Podcast. Like, subscribe, share on YouTube. Let's grow that membership up to 2,000. We're currently at 1,171 at last count. And like, subscribe, share, comment. And finally, last but not least, you can download the podcast Tuesday mornings on iTunes. iTunes shop, itunes.com/Savage Worlds GM podcast. Tonight's episode, carrot or stick? What kind of GM are you? And can you learn a little bit from each side of that camp? Here to discuss it, Chris, the Savage Mommy Fox.
Yeah, like hitting people with a stick.
Dave, the rules Maven Scott.
I don't want to know where the carrot has been.
And Scott W, the Savage Cheerleader, aka Disavow.
Carrot and stick.
Oh, don't do it! Don't do it! Never the two shall meet.
Oh, that's true.
Well, who among us hasn't crossed carrots? I mean, really.
Unfortunately, right. I'm more of a stick guy with my plot point campaigns. Unfortunately.
So let's talk about that. What are we talking about when we say carrot or stick? We're talking about what motivates your players in general, and then how, as a GM, you lead a campaign.
Screw those people. It's my story.
It could be.
Could be.
I mean, technically, I am getting tired of hearing that bullshit. I listen to a lot of shit, and they're like, "It's not really the GM story." I said, "Well, motherfucker, one person at that table actually knows what they want to have happen. Not maybe the general, but you do have an idea of how we're going to get started. You know your villains. You're going to create new villains. You're going to start doing other things. So, let's be honest. I'm kind of over this hippie fucking gaming of there's no railroading, but I mean, it is the GM story. Let's be honest. You are guiding and motivating.
I completely get the whole it's not your story, it's our story and player agency aspect and everything.
Yeah.
But why the fuck is the number one product in our hobby pre-written adventures if we're not expecting someone to come to the table with the story?
Dave, you know that.
Story, not their part of a story, but the motherfucking story.
You know why. One, gamers are fucking not very creative as a 99 percentile. Just watch your actual plays and go play in groups not yours, and you'll see. Go to a convention and play in a random fucking games. And then, laziness.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a book out there that I love called The Lazy GM.
Yes.
Or DM. Yeah.
Great book. Do you have the follow-up, Chris?
Yeah, I have both of them.
Oh my God. The Lazy GM completely changed my entire thought process on worrying about fucking prep to that degree, that we're used to.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird when it comes to like the whole prep conversation in regards to that, despite the fact that I always have something in my head for what's going to happen and what the challenges I specifically want to throw in front of the players and the different things I'm going to have to entice them through using the carrot and stick method. But at the end of the day, my prep is almost 90% in the Carl Kiesler realm. I have to have graphics to throw up if it's a VTT. I have to have, my Chessex mat ready to draw stuff on if it's at the table. It's always the props and the add-on stuff that all my prep is designed around. The story really does kind of grow out of play in the game if you're doing it, fairly well, but God damn it, I'm so happy to be away from games where I have to spend 3 hours looking up the stats for all my monsters and building giant freaking stat blocks that are balanced and shit.
For real.
Wait, there's prep in Savage Worlds? This is new. This is new to me.
There can be. There are probably people who prep the fuck out of their games.
So you say you show up You show up to the game with an idea of what's going to happen.
What?
Yeah, because I run plot points.
But that's not really prep, though, Chris. I don't think that's really prep because you're just familiarizing yourself. Goddamn, I haven't been drinking yet. Familiarizing yourself.
That's true. And,
You know.
and then I read it, and then 10 minutes later, I forgot what I read.
Right? Yeah. So
Because I'm old.
No, that's the stroke talking.
It is the stroke talking. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, I just read that 10 minutes ago, but let me spend another 20 minutes at the table because you player A asked me a question that I don't know the answer to that I just read 10 minutes ago. Son of a bitch. That happened to me last week in my Deadlands game. I'm like, I can't find the fucking answer. And I had just read it like 20 minutes beforehand. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, there it is. And I should have just made the shit up. But, that's not me. I freak out.
What's that danger, though, right? Because if you make something up, then you're going to have to, if you don't make them notes and you go to that next piece of the plot point and you're like, fuck.
Yeah,
so,
very true. And I'm trying to get better at that. I really am.
Bro, I don't denigrate anyone for fucking using modules or plot points. I use modules all the time. Just modify them or look at the overall arc of what the module is trying to do and be like, cool, let's just do this.
Right.
Yeah.
There's nothing like having a module there just as inspiration. Whether you're not actually running it as much as just you're looking at it for ideas.
I can honestly say in the last 8 sessions of gaming that I've run on Friday nights, more than 70% of the time showed up with no idea what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely none.
Yeah.
So now one of the differences I do want to point out, though, prep-wise, is also it depends on how you're playing. At the table, that whole pull it out of your ass GM style flies so much better than it does digitally. Because pulling it out of your ass digitally requires that you've pre-built every monster in the bestiary and have a template for them so that your macros and stuff in your VTTs can work. You have to have a stash of fucking tokens and images ready to go so that you can just pull the random church out of your butt, fill it with skeletons, and let the parties beat on them. Whereas, you show up and you're doing the improv GM thing with no prep whatsoever in a VTT. And okay, yeah, great. You guys are up against skeletons. Give me 20 minutes to design these real quick and drag all their abilities onto their character sheet.
That's your problem for using all that bullshit on digital. You ain't got to do that. You still do theater of mind on digital.
Oh, yeah. One of the best sessions I've seen run recently for digital was run 100% with nothing but Discord. And all the players just went and grabbed their dice and literally hand-rolled their own dice and played the game the way they would have at the table.
Yeah, man, it's baller. Was it actual play that's recorded?
Unfortunately, no.
Ah, fuck.
No, our Friday night group had our GM go down sick, and someone stepped up to run something and just kind of rocked it.
Nice, that's baller.
That's cool.
So do you think, I think prep is then probably more of I guess it's a little bit of both, right? Because you're putting your plot seeds in there as the carrot to hopefully draw them into a direction that you want. And then you can go heavy-handed, stick-wise on a lot of prep, a heavy prep adventure. Yeah,
you can end up driving. You can end up trying to drive the story or steer it in a certain direction. I think is really, what you're doing at the end of the day is you're trying to steer the adventure or the story in one direction or another. Yeah. Whether you're doing that heavy-handedly with, here's a combat that's going to drive you into this town to seek refuge where the next plot thing happens. That's obviously a stick. Whereas presenting something that as the GM is going to entice the players to go investigate, especially if you're playing into their curiosity hindrances or character development things that they've mentioned before in previous sessions, just paying attention to that. And then presenting them with oh my God, we've got to go check this thing out. That's kind of carry. Either way, you're still leading that story at the end of the day. And I think a lot of GMs don't think that it's their job to lead the story. I disagree completely.
So I think, interestingly enough, the idea of the carrot versus the stick in that regard is one that is at least to a certain extent, for anyone who's been in the hobby more than, say, about 10 years, almost is second nature. It's almost kind of built into you because we've been doing this for so long and we've watched the hobby shift more toward player agency. So you have the old school idea of everything came out of a module, and right down to the point where, it used to be it gave you a box of text as the GM to fucking read to your players.
Oh, man.
You still get that.
You do? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's in all the plot points. And
Yep.
I try to not read it word for word. I kind of try to look over it and skim it and give it my own. But sometimes if it's a big old long exposition, I'm just like, fuck it, I'm reading it straight from the book.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you do get that. You get this and seeing it in Deadlands, you get this. It's 6 paragraphs of exposition, and your players are just like, huh?
You know what you could do, Chris? Can you do you're from out west, so can you also do that Western accent, like that cowboy accent?
My accent is the one you got here, and then sometimes I do a really bad Italian.
You should, if you can find someone who can do a really good Western accent, I would have the long one like that. Have someone read that shit, and you just play the audio of it. That way, you're not talking. You just have the villain.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. So I kind of think talking about this, I don't know if this is kind of the right spot, but I kind of wanted to bring up Art's question or his comment.
Mm-hmm.
Because he says one of the annoying things for me is when a player sees a monster and goes, this monster is weak to X and immune to Y. I usually let them think that and then change it on the fly. And yeah, that's gamers for you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for me, I don't try hard enough, but it's like, because I'm a GM, and so I kind of know what some of these creatures do and what they can do. And unfortunately, I'm a GM and I run for a lot of groups. So sometimes I'll read the plot point or I'll read the adventure, and then somebody will be like, oh, I want to run that adventure. Like recently I played an ETU. Well, I've run ETU and I've read everything for ETU.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of played dumb. And our GM was good and kind of changed things around, but I think you could do that, and I think you can do that good. You can do that pretty quickly in Savage Worlds. Is just make one little tweak on the fly. Well, maybe suddenly your werewolf isn't immune to silver.
Right? This is more my question. Why is Monster A and Spot B to begin with? What's interesting about Monster? Not do the players know how to easily defeat it?
Yeah, so
I don't care about that. I care about why it's there and what its purpose is.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a thing I had. I was going to do a video on it a while back, but you're onto the track that I was on as well. Is that our world has almanacs, right? That explorers go out and write. A fantasy world is no fucking different. You would have these nerds who go out and study all this shit. So there's no reason your characters wouldn't have some kind of knowledge about this, especially professionals who go out and do dumb shit. Goblin Slayer, just watch that. That's all about guilds and the ability to know your enemy. But first off, you just take the book out of your player's hand and tell them you read that fucking thing at the table again, I'll break your fucking hands. What the fuck? Mariachi band.
Well, here's more of the angle I'm getting at. Instead of focusing on, oh, my players are metagaming and I fucking hate it, so I'm going to pull a fast one. I'm more along the lines of, what's this beast doing here? Well, the second that takes the first wound or, is shaken, it immediately turns and runs into the mine behind it.
Jared, monsters never run. There's no
right.
morale.
I was about to say everything doesn't have to be a fight to the death.
Right.
But GMs and players think that it does. And I agree with you, Jared. And that's something that I've been doing more of lately is my monsters and bad guys leave.
Nice.
Right.
And the players hate that. Players hate that when they can't kill everything inside or when the big bad guy gets away because he's smart and he's like, well, I'm not going to stand here and let you fucking kill me. I'm going to get the hell out of Dodge. I'm going to live to fight another day. And then you can just see the players just get pissed.
Yeah. And that's a great example of Carrot, right? But also too, I think there's this big push I think everybody's like just caught in D&D land and going through D&D tropes as players and GMs when we're talking Savage Worlds. And I'm like, break the chain, break the reference. If first of all, don't put a monster in front of the players that doesn't have a purpose for being there, other than if you just want combat. And if you just want combat, and that's the only further thought you thought of, don't get pissed at your players when they go, "Oh, I know this thing's weak to X." You can't fault the player for that. You've basically put a pinata in front of them and begged them and taunted them to beat it.
Exactly right. Well, if you don't kill it, you don't get your experience.
Right.
Well, interestingly enough, we actually had this as a design discussion when we were working on Dead End. And for a long time, Dead End had this genre blindness rule where players weren't allowed to use the vast swath of zombie information available in popular media to tell them how their characters would react to a zombie. This idea that you don't know what a zombie is, so you don't know that you have to shoot it in the head.
Yeah.
And we ended up deciding at the end that what we were really trying to do is create a rule that officiated the way people had fun with the setting.
Yeah.
Some players really grok going into the bestiary and knowing every single monstrous ability.
Yeah.
Other players don't want to know that when they sit down at the table. And the only time I think that that you should really step in when a player pulls this, where they say, "Well, this monster is strong against X and weak against Y," is when it ruins the fun of somebody else at the table.
Right.
If it doesn't ruin anybody else's fun, then let them roll with that. That's that player getting to have fun their way. And if you really want to tie it into your game, have them have their character make a common knowledge roll to know that piece of information. And if it's a fairly esoteric thing, put a penalty on it. But if it's common, like a wooden stake is going to kill a vampire, give them a bonus to that roll because their character probably should know that in a world where vampires actually exist.
Yeah. Well, look at all the little bits of lore that we still have handed down to us that are hundreds of years old, if not thousands of years old, right? It still maintains in us. We still have weird shit and weird superstitions. So, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of common knowledge I think people overlook, just like you said.
Like a great example of that is sneeze around anybody. And you don't even get to a 1 count before you hear "God bless you" or "bless you."
Yeah, absolutely, right?
Yes.
And that all comes from the idea that they thought that was a demon trying to get in. If you sneezed, you were opening yourself up to demon possession. So you immediately had to follow a sneeze with "bless you."
Yeah, just weird shit.
Which, well, I actually prefer to shout "get out of her" or him when people sneeze.
Pull out, demon.
Okay.
Get out of him! Is what I like to do. But I mean, back to that whole point is you can't be angry or frustrated with your players for taking advantage of you dropping an XP bag in front of them.
Yeah.
I mean,
player's gonna play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're there to play a game. And if you present them with combat, they're going to pick up combat and start running with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's that old saying, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But
facts.
If you start laying down nails in front of them, knowing that they're a hammer, don't be shocked when they pound them motherfuckers.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And you as a GM can decide, okay, they encounter a bear in the woods. Okay, so the bear will fight as long as they're, trying to stab it or, they're using clubs. The second somebody fires a gun, that bear is DTFO, it's gone.
Yeah.
The second it takes any hit from a gun, it's just out.
You wave fire in its face and it'll run away.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just our earlier conversations of most people don't actually get out in the great outdoors, right? So they don't really understand. So you just watch what's the Animal Planet, right?
Yeah.
Spend 30 minutes on Animal Planet if you want to have some animal encounters.
Well, but that leads back to what you were just saying earlier about like the almanacs and the guides is, assume that their characters have watched 30 minutes of Animal
Absolutely.
Planet, these creatures,
Make your fucking ranger powerful. Don't just make your ranger some dipshit with 2 swords and a drow.
Talk to the dude in Colorado who fucking choked a mountain lion to death.
Yeah,
That dude's a fucking baller.
taken to the natural conclusion, though, is, what if their character is just the mirror image of a gamer from the real world? And a great example of this in a movie was there was a character in How to Train Your Dragon who had the book on all the different dragons. And every time they ran into a different species of dragon, he started rattling off all the things that dragon did differently than the others, because he was that gamer nerd in the party, because that's who he was. Well, the player is putting that into that character. The player has decided they know all that. That's interesting to them. Their character has that information as well.
Right. And think about, that should be your wizard, right? That's the whole point. Or a druid. Your super hyper intelligent spellcasters. And then you take that and you twist it a little bit. And that way you have that little bit of friction between the fucking ranger who been there, done that, right? The guy who actually knows what's happening. And then you have the book smart person, and you can open up an entire dynamic on one stupid fucking encounter that you slightly tweaked for the party, and let them have a good time with it.
And then the reverse is something I've said on the show before as well, is they run across a goblin, and you describe a goblin to the party without using the word goblin. You have them make whatever appropriate knowledge roll, common knowledge or engineering, whatever. Have them make the appropriate roll for your game, and then ask the player to tell you the monstrous abilities, weaknesses, and strengths of that creature. And quite literally, through the act of play, create a brand new monster.
Yeah, man.
It does the things your players are interested in going against.
It's actually pretty interesting.
Your players will create their own challenges when you give them that option. And this, again, that's that carrot option. Don't beat them with the stick of what's in the rule book. Give them the carrot to write their own version of that monster. What would be interesting to you to face?
Sure. That could be kind of fun, actually. Yeah. Just let them use the descriptive adjectives. Yeah, it'd be kind of cool.
And then take good notes.
Yeah, just start making, all you can do is write 4, 6, 8, 10, or 12 down, right, for the attributes and shit. And I'm going to try that. I got a gaming group here locally now.
And write down the name of whatever it is and the stats that you assign each time you do that. And that way you're building your own bestiary of things your players have created at the table.
Yeah, man.
And it's unique to your world, whatever campaign world you're running in. Yeah. Yeah.
The other option is, and Ruben asked us this, is how do you make creatures outside the book, right? The other option is do what I did and buy every pack of the fucking Savage Creature cards, because then there's no end of surprises. Because fuck you, I have hundreds.
And I was going to say too, after our conversation last week, I went out and, during the conversation last week, I won't lie.
Yeah.
I went out and bought that Savage Worlds Alternate Worlds book, because my wanting to run my whole sliders type thing, and there's a whole section in there about tweaking monsters and animals, and they have a chart where you can just, if you really want to, like anything else Savage Worlds, you want to use some cards and just play some cards out and go, okay, well this this rabbit now has ram's horns and this big bushy tail, and it's a meat eater.
There you go.
And then you're like, what the? And then have a couple of those charge your players and watch those buttholes pucker.
Yeah.
Well, I think too that so I mean, and Ruben puts here about is there a variation to a common bestiary creature from Savage Worlds core? The podcast is done. Switch to ability, new weakness, etc. I know that when we did our Mad Max style campaign, it was just taking a scorpion, which is basically the spider. We made it giant and then just gave it 2 tails.
Sure. A mutant or just a different variety. Yeah.
Mutant scorpion. Yeah. I mean, this stuff is not hard to do. I mean, here's the thing. You don't need the bestiary.
No. I'm
going to say this. You can create creatures just like you would create an NPC, because there's this thing called monstrous abilities. And you find edges that makes sense for that creature and just relabel them and rename them.
Yep.
Like it's not beyond the pale for a creature with a tail to have sweep.
Right.
And that's just the edge. Whoosh.
Yep. Nope. I need a field of pseudo poppies that will put your ass to fucking sleep and then carnivorously begin to devour you as you're laying there with any exposed flesh. Cool. Where's that in the bestiary? But I need it.
Yeah, go create it.
Right. Yeah, simple as fuck.
Yeah, go create it.
Swarm damage.
Swarm.
Yeah, exactly.
Swarm.
Right. Yeah.
Because my brain goes to.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, like, and I was actually
With the sleep spell, right?
I just had a conversation Tuesday night with someone who's never played Savage Worlds before,
Mhm.
and they were asking kind of really basic questions about it. I was actually running her parents through an adventure, and she just sitting in to learn about it. And we had a break in the play. I think we were doing a little bio break or something, and she was asking a bunch of questions. And one of the big things I was trying to reinforce to her is that as part of that whole no prep thing is, quite literally, I don't need a statistics block to run whatever you run into in the game, because all I have to know is the general competency that the dice represent. A D4 is very low skill, a D6 is moderate, a D8 is kind of specialized, a D10 is pretty advanced, and a D12 is nearing master. So knowing that, I can automatically reach for, oh, well, this character is a sniper. I'm going to reach for a D10 or a D12. Mm-hmm. This character is an expert in a particular field. I'm going to reach for a D8 or a D10. You can automatically start building your adversaries and even your allies to the party at the table through play, just knowing what die type to reach for how competent you want them to be. And then everything else can just be attacked on edge, or, hey, I really want them to be able to do the Thanos snap. This character has this ability to channel all the power in the cosmos to snap their fingers and to change reality. Doesn't matter if it wipes out half of life or adds resources or changes all the water in the universe to soap bubbles. I don't care what it is. What do I want that to do? Okay, great. Now it's a monstrous ability. I automatically just give it to them because they should have it. And then I start figuring out later on the mechanics of it if I ever have a player who wants to interact against it.
Yeah, sure.
Does it have a weakness or a limitation? It requires they have these 5 specific stones arrayed in this particular matrix to be able to pull the thing off. Now I've added in limitations to that monstrous ability that I gave them that lets them snap their fingers and turn all the water to soap bubbles. Great, okay? You can just add anything you want and call it a monstrous ability. It's that whole don't build NPCs in your game, give them what they should have.
And what's really cool about we talked about this before, right? It's D6 across the board just for standard shit, and a D8, D10, D12. But if you do it one time with a villain who, like Chris said, you get your villains to get away. I'm telling you, and you don't bring that villain back until a time when they also advanced, and you roll a different die that's a higher type, players will notice because they watch everything that you do at the table. And sure as fuck, if you whittle D6 and now you're rolling a D8 or a D10 for the same thing, they're going to be like, hold on a second. And then it's up to you to just make sure you describe it with a little better, professionalism or technique or whatever. But yeah.
Or you just have the villain just in character go, what do you think, I've been sitting on my laurels?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I also have shit to do.
Right. I also have a secret. I'm not left-handed.
Yeah. I fought you guys once, so yeah, I'm not just gonna sit back and not do. I'm gonna prepare myself for the next time.
So, and I'll ask his question because I know Steve personally. Yeah. He goes, "What if that player struggles with creativity and just wants to play?" And he's asking this from both a player's perspective and also as a brand new GM trying to run Savage Worlds kind of for the first time. What happens when you're lacking creativity? And this is where I would say, lean on the books, lean on the plot points, lean on the one shots. Most one shot adventures that you're going to download right now are going to have a stat block for every single monster included in that adventure.
Yep.
And they're even going to go so far as to say this would be a great scene to use a quick encounter or a dramatic task or a chase.
Yep.
They're going to even tell you what mechanic to use.
That's how I learned Savage Worlds, is through the one-shots and running them weekly, right? But also for Steve, a big secret is man, everyone starts the same. When I started D&D in, I don't know, 82, 83, I was all about dungeon crawls, just like everyone else, right? Simple, straightforward. The creativity was, what's this cool thing my character wears, right? I got a sword on my back, right? You start small and then you work your way big. It just takes time. That's all. But you got to encourage it in all parts, and don't say no outright to crazy shit. You can control it, with parameters. But yeah, bennies. Every time someone does something very creative, make sure you benny it. I don't know, put a ribbon on your finger, the memory string, a clicker, something, I don't know, just to get your muscle memory in there to do bennies whenever someone does something creative.
And I think that if you have that player who struggles with creativity, don't try to force it on him. Just let them play. Maybe they're there to roll the dice. Maybe they're there to take everyone else's creativity and kind of just sponge that. Yep. And learn from that, or just sit there and say, hey, I'll let the other guys be creative. I'm just here to roll some dice. And people will do that. And just let them just kind of look at your players, see what your players want. And you have that player who's a little quieter or doesn't give all the creative stuff. They don't want to make their own monsters at the table. Don't force it on them.
Nope.
Well, I think there's an interesting aspect to that too, that pay attention, and this is more an advanced GM thing specific to Savage Worlds, and that is pay attention to your wallflowers, and when their character accomplishes something really cool or interesting, award that a Benny. Because that's what they're there for. They're there to just play the game and engage. Yep. So they're not going to be role-playing their hindrances as much. They're not going to be doing those other things that traditionally generate Bennies. Right. So if your character does something bombastic, award that with a Benny, because you're awarding the play style you see that player has brought to the table.
Absolutely. And, you can ask those open questions and leading questions, right? That's how I train my sailors. I don't just sit there and talk about whatever nonsensical topic, and this is no different than gaming for me. It's like, okay, cool story. So what do you know about the bartender, right? And you'll start getting those small flows, and you'll start seeing those sparks fly.
Yeah, and no matter what they tell you, give them a Benny.
Yeah, who cares? Yeah, it's like, right? That's right. He is a fucking dick, and he does not like you guys. Here's a Benny.
Right.
And then play that out.
I would say too, if you have the wallflower character, just to expound on what Chris and everybody is saying as well, if you have the player that's there, and their character, the way they want to play the game is a total support character. They're not front and center. They're not coming in with a weird accent. They're not trying to steal the limelight. They're just literally there to go, where do you need me? What do you need me to do? And I'm here to roll dice. When they get more than one raise, give them a Benny. Go ahead. Give them a Benny. If all they're doing that night at the table is rolling dice, and something explodes multiple times at a critical moment, and it's their roll, give them a Benny. You can give a Benny out for anything. And I would say this, make sure when you're giving here's the key to Bennies, ladies and gentlemen in Savage Worlds. Those are literal carrots for the behaviors you want at your table as a GM.
Yep.
So when you have a player who plays a hindrance in a cool and interesting way, or to their own detriment or the detriment of their party, and makes things complicated, give them the Benny for the hindrance and announce why you're giving them the Benny.
Yes.
Great way to play that Benny that fucks over your entire group in this situation and takes the sure win out of your hands. Here's the Benny. Great character voice. I don't care that the accent started at Spanish and ended up somewhere in Jamaica. Here's a Benny for role playing with an accent. Make sure you announce why you're giving the Benny. And you'll notice if you sit back, this little thing will happen. The players among themselves start getting competitive with each other.
Yep.
Oh, you got a Benny for making a cool, funny voice? There's a Benny. Aha! And everybody will start jumping in on that Benny train.
Yeah.
It's human nature. It's human psychology.
You know what I'm going to start giving Bennies for? Paying attention.
There you go.
Fucking facts.
Hey, way to go with having your action ready. Boom.
Yep.
Yeah. What'd you say, Dave? Way to not have your phone out at the table. Have a Benny.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's definitely a carrot moment. But you bring the phone to the table too many times. I'm going to get the ruler out. And we're going to introduce you to the idea of stick.
Yeah. Here's a Benny. Go. Here's a Benny. Go pick your own hickory stick from the backyard.
So interestingly enough, when we talked about this topic initially, I had said, it's a word answer. Bennies, because like we just said, bennies are the literal interpretation of the carrot in Savage Worlds.
Yeah.
But I think we've talked about some other ideas, like, putting the characters in a situation where the carrot is a character motivation that they're going to want to track down. Mm-hmm. The characters fight a band of goblins that ambush them on the side of the road, and they clearly see the trail into the woods that the goblins took to run off. And right next to the trail is a tree with a wanted poster on it, clearly indicating there's a 15 gold bounty for every goblin ear that's brought in. And all of a sudden, you have just generated the carrot to drag them off on the adventure to go root through a goblin lair and explore it. Very quick and very easy.
And Dave brings colonial imperialism to gaming.
I mean, it fucking worked for the English.
I don't know. It sounds a lot like scalping.
Disavow.
I don't know if I agree with that.
No, yeah, it's just I don't know.
It's got to be against YouTube's policy somehow. Demonetize.
Oh my god.
Oh, like we were ever fucking monetized.
Hey, I'm rolling in that $1 a month. I'm telling you, it makes a difference.
Do you lay it on your bed and just roll all over it?
Yeah,
after I cash it into pennies, you bet your ass.
Yeah.
How much of that comes from YouTube Red subscriptions that the people who are watching this actually just happen to have to avoid fucking ads?
Oh man.
Yeah, we do this for the love of the game, ladies and gentlemen. There's no money in it, especially at the YouTube. At our subscriber level and viewership level, yeah, there's no money in this for us.
Whatever. It's just, yeah, it really is fun. Like when we first started talking, I needed other nerds to talk to because in my line of work, you might be surprised there aren't a lot of people who are into fucking Dungeons and Dragons.
Really? I mean, I really. I know a lot of military folks that are. I thought there was a good proportion that actually were.
Chris, you need to dial in a really fine fucking dilation optic on the folks that I work with.
Gotcha.
To understand.
I'll put it this way: I work with
the amount of people I have met who are military and gamers. While it is a high number, is a very small percentage of the number of people who are currently serving in the armed forces.
All right.
There's a lot of nerds in the military, yeah.
Yeah, let me pull a jib and tell you a story. I work primarily with millennials. Yeah. And they ask me, hey, are you into gaming? And I go, yeah, I'm big into gaming. And they went, really, what? I went, yeah, role-playing games. And they go, oh, so like what, Red Dead Redemption? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
No. Role playing where you act out and take on the role of, tabletop role playing games.
Oh, D&D.
Oh, D&D. Yeah, no, not D&D.
Like D&D. Yeah, D&D for this conversation.
Yeah, that's what I say. Yeah, it's like D&D.
Yeah. All right, we're off course now.
Yeah, a little bit.
I think we were off course like 5 minutes in.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, this is a carrot and stick.
No, it's carrot. We've really kind of talked about the topic. I mean, a bad example, or actually a good example, a bad habit of stick is railroading. So let's talk about that. That's an example of using a stick to try to move players along rail down a specific plot line that they are not supposed to deviate from, because you've got a story that you've laid out for the night and you don't have anything else prepped. So now it's tunnel vision. There are no options.
Shut up.
No other options.
Quit talking about me.
Not even within the confines of that rail cart
Oh, I give him some.
I want
give him some
to
options.
climb on the roof and go, hoo hoo. No.
You can't
Not
do it with
allowed.
the machine gun. You got to take that out first. Well, that's mostly convention games, though, right? You have no choice in a con game because you got to.
Right. You have
Yeah.
to railroad.
Well, I think that's a
I
given
hate
too. I think
that.
the audience understands that too.
I was gonna say I hate that side of the conversation because while it's expected in a con game, all the players have bought into the idea of this is not a game as much as this is a ride. I get on it at point A, I get off it at point B, and I just enjoy the sights and the sounds through the Magic Mountain. So I hate the constant reference to con games specifically. But I mean, let's be honest, at the end of the day, there's still a lot of motherfuckers in the hobby who railroad their players because they don't know what else to do.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's I don't know. There's not a this is not really a need for a cure. It just depends on how you like to play and kind of what your players want out of it too.
And I think if you spend some time with Savage Worlds and spend some time with it, you'll see that you don't need a railroad, because we say it all the time about just, give the NPC what they want and everything. And so if you really spend some time with it and you really think about it, you can create quite a bit of stuff on the fly, even if you have an idea of what you want to have happen and they throw a monkey wrench. Yeah, it might be, and I won't lie, because, and we all know about me being Mr. Plot Point, and might be a little uncomfortable from time to time, but just kind of, do your best to kind of run with what your players want to do, and it's something that I continue to work on. Well,
I don't think. Okay, let me. I want to interject something here. I think that there is some undue pressure the GMs are putting on themselves to be in control. Control is an illusion.
Sure.
Especially in this game, you're not in control of jack shit. The players have choice, and to complicate that, there's a fucking thing called a randomizer, where the player doesn't get to say and the GM doesn't get to say. The dice say. So
very true.
This whole idea that you can somehow show up at the game and be in complete control of every aspect of what's happening and unfurling at the game is ludicrous. It's insane. And here's the thing. I think there's a certain fear the GMs have of not being in control of, like, well, what do I do if the players do something unexpected? Here's what I'm going to say. Lean in. Because that is where the fun is for the GM. I literally don't need to do anything more than present a problem and let the players solve the puzzle any way they want and just apply some common sense to what happens as a result. I don't have to have a planned outcome. I don't need. Gaming should not be a flow chart. It's not a decision tree of if, then, this, that, then this, that, or that, this. And I think that's how a lot of GMs want to come and approach it. And you can literally just go, okay, where is this? There's a certain wisdom to going, okay, it's more important for me as a GM to know the motivations of my NPCs and what is happening in the world, so that I know what the organic reaction is going to be to anything the players do. And then I just role play accordingly. You're role playing as well as the players are, but you're in a reactionary state. They're in an active state. They're making the decisions. They're starting the fires. You're putting them out.
Yeah. Well, there are GMs whose style isn't that. Well, I guess groups, right? Where you have players who can go and seek out the next adventure, right? Because they want to go to town, they're going to role play, they'll talk to someone, and they'll start building an adventure just in their dialogues. And then you have the converse of that, which is that GM who's like, okay, cool story, you guys rested up, all right, awesome. The town crier comes to you and says, oh, my lords, can you please help? The mayor wants to see you, and off you go to the next adventure, pre-written and preordained.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong. This place, we're not making a value judgment.
No, not at all.
So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with running a railroaded pre-generated module as long as that's what everybody is signed on to do and is good for. What I'm saying is there's this whole new world, this whole other world of, okay, we're playing in the Wild West. It's a law-abiding town. And at some point tonight, there's probably going to be a bank heist. Because I've kind of decided as the GM that this is what's happening in the world. Some bandits have been, some outlaws have been camping on the outskirts of town. They've been scoping out the bank. They've been watching the town. And at noon, they're going to strike. All right. So you guys ride into Dustwood on a bright sunny morning after being on the road. And it's a typical Western prairie town. There's a church at the end. It's dirt roads. There's a barber shop. There's a saloon. There's a hotel. There's a small sheriff's station. People are going about their business. What do you do? Well, we're going to go into the saloon and have a drink. Great. I know what happens. I don't need to have a plot point knowing what's going on in the saloon because we've all seen a Western.
Right, yeah.
We all know what goes on in a saloon.
Yeah. Yep.
And if the players want to start a bar fight, let them.
Yeah, who cares?
Yeah, go ahead, have a bar fight.
To be fair, unless it's your very first time playing a role-playing game, we all know what happens as soon as you put player characters in a bar.
Oh, of course.
All know what happens as soon as you put player characters in front of a guard who's summoning them to authority. Like, you should have at least a modicum of your own personal experiences at the table to draw from to shape what you're going to do next.
Yeah.
When you're put into that situation where you don't know how to react to what it is the players just did, just think back to a previous game where you've run something where that was what you led them to go do, and now you'll know kind of the basics of how to react to it.
Right.
I think,
you know how the bartender and patrons are going to react to a bar fight breaking out. There's going to be a couple drunks who are all about it and jump right in. Most of the people are going to run for the exits or cower behind the bar under the table. The bartender might let it go for a little while before he pulls out a baseball bat or a shotgun and breaks it up, or sends somebody to go get the sheriff. The thing is, you didn't
back who always fight each other, and they're not actually fighting. They're just pretending to fight.
Right.
And, they want to look like they're engaged so no one else goes after them.
Right. And here's the thing. You didn't, as a GM, put the players in the saloon to have a bar fight. You didn't make that decision. You set the table and went, here's a Western town. What do you want to do? And they decided as player characters to go into the bar, have a shot of whiskey, and start a bar fight.
Yeah. And if you've never been to a bar in real life, go to a bar. If you've never been to a strip club, go to a fucking strip club. If you're playing Cyberpunk and you've never been to a rave, watch the rave scene from Go. Get some experience, right? You have to have seen it with your eyes. It's how we are. You can't read about a rave, right? It just won't matter.
You can, but
it won't make sense.
You're never going to be able to capture it in your game if you haven't experienced it.
No, right? Exactly. You got to experience things in some way other than, Wikipedia says that a rave is full of narcotics. I'm not saying go drop ecstasy either. I want to disavow any conclusion from this.
But we're just saying too, have a rough idea of what your NPCs are going to do or what their values are, what their motivations are. If as far as the bartender is concerned, maybe bar fights break out in this saloon twice a week. As long as it doesn't break any of the glass, he doesn't give a shit. Go ahead, let him fight it out. It's just easier not to get involved until they start breaking glasses, and then that's stepping into my pocket.
Right, yeah.
And maybe he's got a deal. Maybe he's got a deal with the local carpenter where he drinks free for repairing all the broken tables and shit.
Right.
I mean, you can think of things that are interesting and kind of put yourself in that position of your job as a GM is to kind of figure out what happened 10 minutes before the players step into the scene.
Mm-hmm.
That's your level of prep or control.
So, let's assume for a moment that you've decided that this is a bar that has regular bar fights. But let's say you didn't decide that until 10 minutes after you introduced to the bar in the game because some player decided to walk into it. And you narrated, you walk into a traditional Western bar. There's a guy in a plaid shirt behind the bar serving drinks. There's a line of can girls on the stage, and there's a typical mix of miners, gunslingers, cowherds throughout the tables. And then as your players start to engage and tell you what they're looking at, you can read your table and you can tell they're looking for a bar fight. Okay? And then you decide in your head, okay, well, this is a bar that bar fights happen at. The next time a player does something, narrate, hey, by the way, your character also happens to look around, and all the tables look like they've been nailed back together. You can see repairs to them. And as you look, there's a special kind of a bar that runs across the front of where all the bottles are stored. You can tell it's a little more difficult. The bartender has to reach up and over this thing to lift it out of. That's a little protective as he pours your drink and puts it back. You've now given them a subtle hint that environment is used to the behavior that they want to engage in. You've just set the tone to the player on a subtle level that you're welcoming them to do the thing you can already tell they want to do.
Yeah. And the opposite is true too, right? So let's say they decide, you know what, we're going to go into the barbershop and get a shave. Okay, well, then what should happen in a barbershop? Well, guess what? Gossip.
Yeah, right?
Right? Because that's what you would
threads.
Yeah, plot threads. So the bartender, the barber immediately goes, you fellas, I ain't seen you around. You new in town? Just passing through? And he just starts just normal little chit-chat. Yeah. And if they ask anything about the saloon, he goes, well, a man ought not to step in that saloon doesn't know how to handle himself. I'll tell you that much right now. And you just have sort of set it up to like, hey, the saloon's a rough place.
Yeah.
And then the other thing to remember is occasionally, and not all the time, but occasionally, you want to go with expectation subversion when those moments pop up. The players go into the bar, they get into the bar fight. They knock out the guy who was being the biggest dick in the room. He was the one who was actually spoiling for and kind of starting the fight. The player characters knock him out, and the little runt at the bar who was ordering his whiskey and this guy was picking on that the player character saved, turns around and looks at him and goes, God, I wish you hadn't done that. Hey, Jim, leave it on my tab. I'll pay you next week. And then have the sheriff walk in and arrest the runt and the player character for beating up the town deputy, who's a known mean drunk who goes into the bar and does this, and everyone in town won't get into a fight with him because they know the law is corrupt in this town, right, and is going to punish them for fighting back against the asshole.
Right. And maybe the parishioner of the local church likes to stroll in on a Saturday night and try to save everybody.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe he's trying to
drum
up attendance in church in the following morning with promises of hellfire and brimstone. I mean, you just take things that are cliched about a Western that everybody, and we're just using this as an example, as a Western. Here's the thing. You don't need to have that pre-planned. All that can be just inspiration on the fly. A player can make a slight comment and spark an idea.
Oh, yeah.
Lean in. Don't run away from it. Embrace it. Don't be afraid of it. And here's the great thing. I think the GMs think that their players are horrible critics, and they're sitting there waiting for them to make a mistake so that they can leave the table and go, Jesus, this guy fucking sucks. It's not like that.
Every GM leaves the table going, Jesus, I fucking suck.
Every GM does.
Yep. Every player leaves the table going, that was fucking awesome.
Yeah.
You
gotta really fuck it up to not be appreciated by players.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, here's the thing. And then I just want to bring up one more thing here with John McGowan. So a little bit of complimentary back patting for us. New to Savage Worlds, I've been listening to the podcast back catalog, It's so good. I'm genuinely a better GM for it. Thanks, guys. You're welcome, John.
Yeah, man.
What we're here to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Then the question: are GM bennies the stick if player bennies are the carrot? Not necessarily.
I was gonna say he's going through the back catalog. I don't think he's gotten to one of those suggestions yet.
I apologize for the early part of the back catalog that I was on.
There was a point in time where I felt that using GM bennies was kind of foul or a cheat against the players, that it robbed them of something. I've since changed my mind dramatically on that, and then I use it to make things interesting. Not necessarily to make sure my bad guy wins, but not to make sure he's not an easy pushover either. So one of my favorite things to do with GM bennies is start an opposed, be the instigator in an opposed action.
Oh yeah.
Roll die and then have them go, okay, go, whoa. No, I'm not happy with that. I can roll higher.
Right.
A trick or a test, and you know it's going to be opposed, and you keep dropping GM bennies to get it up to a 20.
Right.
There you go. Okay, there's what you got to beat. Enjoy.
Yeah, I vocalized too, and I'm going to use a Benny as a villain, right? It was like, you know what? This guy's kind of an arrogant dick. No, he's not going to give this one to you, and then I'll use the Benny. But it just reinforces everything that I'm hoping to convey.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll throw Jared under the bus here for a minute and say that I think all of us who are on the show, and probably most of the people who've watched the show for a while, have also picked up two different Benny particular mechanics. And one is the Benny bait, the "are you happy with that" thing to get players, to spend bennies maybe when they shouldn't need to. And that is where bennies become the stick rather than the carrot. The reverse, though, is true as well of, oh, I see here your character is overconfident and you can clearly see the thing down at the bottom of the pit. I will give you one of my GM bennies to just jump into the hole after the thing. It's at least a 20-foot drop, but you're fairly certain you can make it.
Right. Yeah, sometimes you got to do that.
Yeah, that's the carrot, because not only is the player getting a Benny for putting themselves in a bad way, but they're taking a Benny away from me that I can't later use for the big bad to soak a wound or in order to do those other nasty things that the GM can do with bennies.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're near the end of an hour. So just want to check the chat real quick, see if there's anything else in there that we want to address.
Mm-mm. Everyone's just having a good time.
Yep.
Chatting.
All right. Okay. So until next time, then we'll go ahead and close the show down. So until next time, this is Jared Savage Daddy Gunning for Scott, Dave, and Chris saying keep rolling and stay savage.
Barely